Coming up today, South Korea, the United States and Japan warn North Korea against launching a provocation as speculation mounts. The regime is preparing a long-range rocket launch. President Park Geun-hye is back in Seoul after her trip to New York for a series of UN meetings. From her words for North Korea to expanding South Korea's role in sustainable development, we'll have a wrap-up. Plus, we'll hear how Korea's rigid labour and financial sectors are stifling the nation's global competitiveness. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Wednesday, the 30th of September. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. Our top story this afternoon, the top diplomats of South Korea, the United States and Japan have warned North Korea against launching a provocation. They stress such a move would trigger much tougher international sanctions against the regime. The United Front comes as speculation mounts Pyongyang will launch a rocket next month to mark a key political anniversary. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent Song Ju-sun starts us off.
South Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se met with his U.S. and Japanese counterparts, John Kerry and Fumio Kishida, on Tuesday to reaffirm their stance that any provocative action from Pyongyang will further isolate the communist state from the international community. The three stressed any violation of a UN Security Council resolution will incur further significant measures, which would include both economic and diplomatic sanctions, and that the Security Council has begun working-level studies into reviewing measures that will be stronger than before and much more detrimental to the North.
There will be stronger sanctions on top of the current ones. These will be based on what kind of hostile action North Korea takes. If the North launches a provocation, members of the UN Security Council and other related countries will start discussing the measures.
Ahead of its ruling party's 70th anniversary on October 10th, Pyongyang has been threatening to push forward with a rocket launch that is, quote, aimed at putting satellites into orbit. But UN Security Council resolutions ban such attempts as they're more likely covers for testing long-range missiles. The three sides also share some common ground that Japan's exercise of its collective self-defense should be carried out in a transparent manner that respects South Korea's sovereignty. Tokyo recently passed new security legislation allowing its self-defense forces to fight overseas in the name of aiding allies, which, in the event of war with North Korea, could enable Japanese forces to enter the Korean peninsula in the name of helping the U.S. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Now, President Park Geun-hye is back in Seoul after attending a series of meetings at the UN headquarters in New York. Much of her trip was focused on warning North Korea against fresh provocations and pledging an expanded South Korean role in the global push for sustainable development. Hwang Sang-hee reports.
After wrapping up her four-day stay in New York, President Park Geun-hye arrived in Seoul on Wednesday. The main event of her trip was attending the 70th UN General Assembly. There, she used her keynote speech as an opportunity to sway North Korea from making further provocations. Her trip came amid Pyongyang's nuclear threats and speculation of a possible long-range rocket launch next month.
북한이 과감하게 핵을 포기하고 개방과 협력의 길로 나온다면 대한민국은 국제사회와 힘을 모아 북한이 경제를 개발하고 주민들의 삶의 질을 향상시킬 수 있도록 적극 지원할 것입니다.
She stressed the importance of reunification, saying it would ultimately lead to a nuclear-free Korean peninsula. Much of President Park's trip was also spent introducing the so-called Semaul movement, an initiative that led the modernization of South Korea's rural economy in the 1970s.
By adapting to the distinct needs of countries and to the changing times, the Semaul 운동 can become a strategy for rural development globally and for progress nationally.
As part of her agenda, President Park pledged to expand South Korea's role in global efforts for sustainable development. starting with a donation of $200 million over the next 5 years to ensure a better life for girls growing up in developing countries. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
Now, President Park Geun-hye's speech to the UN General Assembly this week was widely well received by global leaders, but North Korea was far from impressed. Pyongyang says the South Korean leader's choice of words may have put the upcoming reunion event for war-separated families at risk. Han Dan reports.
North Korea has slammed President Park Geun-hye for her speech this week at the United Nations, in which she warned Pyongyang about the consequences of further provocations. North Korea's committee in charge of inter-Korean relations said President Park had spewed out thoughtless words that attacked Korea's own people and set the two Koreas at odds on the global stage. Saying it was a provocation aimed at North Korea, the committee claimed the speech had ruined North-South relations as they were just beginning to warm up. It went on to say that President Park's speech, in the name of peace, reflected her ambition to reunify the Koreas by absorbing the North into the South with the help of foreign countries. It also said the South Korean leader had jeopardized planned reunions for families separated by the Korean War. The event is scheduled to be held at North Korea's Mount Kumgang Resort from October 20th to the 26th. During her speech on Monday, President Park said Seoul would fully support North Korea in developing its economy and improving the quality of life of its people if the regime abandons its nuclear program. The two Koreas had made a landmark agreement last month to hold high-level inter-Korean talks in Seoul or Pyongyang as soon as possible. But experts say that, too, looks murky as the atmosphere turns hostile on the peninsula on top of North Korea's possible launch of a long-range rocket to coincide the 70th anniversary of the founding of the Workers' Party. Han Dan, Arirang News.
Turning to domestic politics now, and despite an unexpected agreement reached among rival party leaders over the Chuseok holiday, infighting continues over plans to change Korea's election rules. Chairman of the ruling Saenuri Party, Kim Moo-sung, convened a Supreme Council meeting for Wednesday afternoon to explain his meeting with Moon Jae-in, his counterpart from the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy. Seeing it as an opportunity to widen his political clout, Kim has been challenged by lawmakers loyal to President Park Geun-hye, who question his push for open primaries. Now, Moon, who suffered heavy infighting over his party's reform measures, is being pressured to demonstrate his leadership by implementing reform initiatives. However, prospects of the agreement being implemented remains uncertain as party members, especially those from the ruling party, are likely to oppose the agreement. Korea's position in the World Economic Forum's report on global competitiveness has remained static for a second year in a row. Korea's macroeconomic environment garnered positive appraisement, but the nation's rigid financial and labour sectors continue to drag heavily on the overall ranking. Son Jong-in has more.
Korea has placed 26th overall among 140 countries surveyed in the World Economic Forum's latest Global Competitiveness Index. The ranking is unchanged from last year. Korea ranked 29th in 2004 and rose to as high as 11th 3 years later. However, just as its entry into the top 10 was in sight, Korea's position tumbled to 24th in 2011. In this year's report, Korea saw its ranking in macroeconomic environment rise by 2 notches to 5th place, scoring high in annual inflation, country credit rating, and government budget balance. Asia's 4th largest economy also earned high marks for having a high education level, broadband internet subscriptions, and patent applications. In particular, due to deregulation efforts, the evaluation on starting businesses shot off from 32nd to 8th place. However, Korea's labor and financial markets are still falling behind, dragging the country's ranking down. Korea's cooperation between labor and management ranked bottom at 132nd, while soundness of banks ranked a lowly 113th. Transparency of government policymaking stood at 123rd, while efficacy of corporate boards was 120th, signaling the country's conglomerates are still largely controlled by certain families. Experts say the government must reform Korea's labor and financial sectors to improve business investments. Switzerland maintained its top position on the list, followed by Singapore and the United States. Japan was 6th, while China trailed in 28th place, unchanged from last year. 손정인, Arirang News.
Now, numerous economic analysts' bleak growth outlook has many worried that Korea's slow growth trend might be here to stay for a while at least. But at least one expert says it's a result of the Korean economy becoming more advanced. Shin Se-min reports.
Deepening concerns over the health of the Chinese economy is rattling emerging markets, including Korea. However, a report compiled by economists at Oxford University shows Korea is the second best equipped among 13 emerging economies to ride out a crisis if the global economy suddenly worsens. Only the Philippines was ranked higher on the list for being least vulnerable to external factors. However, there are concerns over Korea's slowing growth. There are expectations the country's GDP will expand the least behind Brazil and Russia. Already, multiple economic organizations have laid out bleak forecasts that the economy will only grow some 2% for the year. Moody's Credit Rating Institute predicts a 2.5% growth, while Korea's LG Economic Research Institute and the Korea Economic Research Institute both revised their forecast down to 2.6 and 2.4 respectively. Experts say the stagnant growth is a result of Korea's greater economic scale.
With the size of the Korean economy growing to resemble that of advanced countries, it is natural that growth slows. That's what we are seeing with the slowing growth in Korea.
Experts say market watchers are leaning toward what the Bank of Korea has to offer for their outlook this month, with many expecting another possible downgrade to its 2.8 forecast. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, with dozens of lawsuits filed in the US and Canada against Volkswagen in the past few days, one has now also been filed against the company right here in Korea. Two local Volkswagen and Audi owners are suing Volkswagen, Audi Volkswagen Korea and local car dealers over the emissions rigging software, saying that they would not have bought the vehicles if they had known they did not meet emission standards. They are demanding full compensation for the vehicles. A slew of similar lawsuits are expected to follow. Meanwhile, Volkswagen has said that it will begin sending recall information in the next few days to the owners of the 11 million cars affected around the world. If you're watching us in Korea, you better have your wallet at the ready. America's retail phenomenon known as Black Friday has reached Korea's shores. Thousands of stores will be slashing prices by up to 70% for the country's own version from Thursday. The government hopes Korea's biggest ever sales event will boost consumer spending and make up for the country's slowing exports and slow growth. Unlike the US, Black Friday sales are going to run for 2 weeks until October 14th, so plenty of times to pick up a bargain. Around 26,000 stores are taking part, including online markets, department stores and online shopping malls. It was a meeting few would have thought possible even a year or so ago, but the presidents of the United States and Cuba met on US soil for talks on building upon their increasingly friendly ties. Speaking after the meeting held on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York, a Cuban official said US President Barack Obama and his Cuban counterpart Raul Castro held respectful and constructive talks on steps to continue the process of normalizing US-Cuban relations. He said Castro repeated demands the US lift its embargo on Cuba and return Guantanamo Bay. The White House said Obama reaffirmed Washington's commitment to respecting and actively protecting human rights in Cuba. Korea and Russia mark 25 years of diplomatic ties today. With these ties, their economic partnership has grown enormously. However, according to experts, not too much in value, only in volume. Gwon-soa has this report.
With the official Korea-Russia partnership beginning in 1990, the two continuously expanded their economic ties. Official data compiled since 1992 shows that trade up to last year jumped more than 130 times to almost $26 billion. That's an average annual growth rate of 25%. In 2014, Russia was Korea's 12th biggest export partner and 11th biggest import partner. For Russia, Korea was the 9th biggest importer, but things have been better when in 2006 Korea ranked 5th. Last year, many items shipped to Russia have posted negative growth, including Korea's top export items to the country: automobiles, medicines and medical supplies, and automotive parts. On the whole, experts evaluate the quarter century as successful in terms of the amount of economic cooperation, but not too much when it comes to the value of that partnership.
When comparing the amount of imports and exports with Russia, the amount of investment is very small. Despite a large increase of Korean companies doing business in Russia, Russia has been only investing $190 million into Korea during the 25-year span.
At $2.2 billion, Korea's investment in Russia also accounted for just 0.4% of its total outbound investment. Apart from improving investment, analysts say trade items need to be distributed more effectively according to regions within Russia, and that a free trade agreement needs to be implemented to boost the bilateral partnership in coming years. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Well, unfortunately, that's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broome. Thank you, as always, for tuning in, and we'll be back throughout the day with more newscasts. Goodbye.